So what we're going to do is chat about what archetypes are, things like, maybe not in this order, what they are, why they matter, how the knowledge came about. I'll share an easy way to access the knowledge, and Gary will look at what he does. What is that called again? What is PMI?
PMAI.
Why is it called
just,
that?
It's the Pearson-Meyer archetype indicator, I think is the I. And Pearson and Meyer, Carol Pearson, she's very well known in the field of archetypes. She has a PhD and she has a center on the west coast of the US. I think the center's still there, although she's retired back home to the East Coast, which is where she's
What was her name?
Carol S. Pearson. There's two Carol Pearsons who are writers, so she's written books. And
is she the one who wrote the book that the work that you do is founded on?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I encountered that when I did my master's in counseling. Her textbook, which is called The Heroes Within, 12 Archetypes We Live By.
Yep.
So there are more than 12 archetypes. In fact, there's an archetype for just about everything. But these are 12 key psychological archetypes. So if you just Google archetypes, there's lots of people who are into archetypes. And most people have distilled the world of archetypes down to 12 key psychological archetypes. I say psychological because I'll distinguish that in a moment. You ask where they come from.
Yeah, you could share about that.
Just before I do that, though, yes, the names for the archetypes, even if people work with the same 12, the names can differ sometimes. So I learned about archetypes. Well, I learned a structured way of working with archetypes through Carol Pearson's work, and she later collaborated with Hugh Meyer is his name. So
funny name.
They're researchers, and so they updated her original work that I just mentioned. They updated it together. It's based on research, and so now it's called the Pearson-Meyer Archetype Indicator instead of the original Heroic Myth Index, which is what it was
really
called.
like that name, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So archetypes. Some people might know about archetypes through Plato. Plato first talked about archetypes, and Plato. Again, we are impoverished by not having access to the classics in our education these days. But Plato talked about the realm of ideas or the realm of forms. I think, to the best of my knowledge, they're the same thing, but I could be wrong about that. But that's the world we cannot see, where all things exist. In Plato's thinking, all things exist before they find form on earth. So they exist in archetypal form first.
That's interesting.
I kind of think it overlaps with the field of physics. Like we're talking about energies, really, when we're talking about archetypes.
Yeah.
And so on and on we rolled. When Carl Jung kind of revived the presence of archetypes in our lives, because if people know much about his work, that's Carl Jung with a J, J-U-N-G. The people who work with Carl Jung's work are called Jungians.
Yeah, there's a really good podcast called This Jungian Life I would like to listen to.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. So he's a very interesting man. He was heir apparent to Sigmund Freud, but they differed so much that they broke ways with each other. And so Carl Jung was very interested in uh, anyway, in what were called primitive cultures then, right? So the European, he was Austrian, but nevertheless, the European mentality went out across the world, right, into all these primitive cultures. So he went exploring, spent a lot of time in Africa, and he developed his ideas about archetypes. Well, he developed them further, I should say, through experiencing that no matter how different cultures were, there were very strongly defined roles that people played. And so the Carol Pearson's 12 archetypes are called, well, I won't go through them all because I could get go down a track, but so for example, the warrior archetype, Warrior, all cultures have the persona of the warrior. So we can take on, we all know what it means. You say the word warrior, and we know it's quite a descriptive word. We know that warriors have a lot of discipline, they have aims, they're assertive, they have goals to accomplish, and warriors usually work under the umbrella of the king or queen. And in terms of psychology, we could probably say the warrior can be put to work under the direction of the integrated self as the king or queen of us. And all cultures have the caregiver. And if people don't know what that feels like, just get pregnant, have a baby, and all of a sudden, it evokes all of these caregiving attributes around nurturing and compassion and all those nice qualities.
The thing that I know we'll get to, I would like to just slot this in as to why we're actually talking about it, because some people might be like, how does this relate to trauma? What the heck are you guys talking about? Is in the archetypes, there's a shadow self. Like there's a part of it that's light and there's the part that's dark. So like I remember learning about Demeter, the mother, the caregiver archetype, and Demeter in the light as a mother who is whole and healed. She actually trusts her child and trusts the world a bit more and helps her child get on their own 2 feet and is nurturing and caring. But Demeter in the dark, and I remember, like, I'll tell more about this after, but is overprotective, doesn't let her child out, and there's a darkness and possession and all those kinds of things. But it's like the same archetype, but there's both sides. So when I found archetypes, what was powerful was the ability to go, oh, I have a shadow. Like, you know how we like to pretend we're perfect.
Yes.
And I was like actually confronted with my own shadow and went, oh, that's actually not okay that I'm doing that. But what was really great, we'll show more after. I just wanted to sort of slot in why we're talking about it.
That's a good idea. Can I just follow up? I don't know if this is the kind of Socratic dialogue you had in mind, but you talk about Demeter and her parenting. You know who Demeter's daughter was, do you?
Persephone?
Yep, that's right, Persephone. You know what happened to Persephone?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So for people who are listening who might be interested, Persephone was lured into the realm of Hades, and ate of the fruit that Hades gave, but seeds of the pomegranate, I think, and therefore was consigned to the underworld. That's Hades' realm, the underworld. Hades, you can think of it as the devil, and Demeter then pleaded with, I think, Zeus to free Persephone. And the deal they worked out was that Persephone could come back to her mother's realm of the earth, for 6 months of the year and be in the underworld the other 6 months of the year. So talk about your shadow self. Persephone lived that out. And yes, so
Well,
Persephone brings spring when she's coming, when
mm.
the journey comes, spring comes with it. What are you thinking?
I was just thinking, like, and we're one of we're those people that would just go, "Blah," get really excited. But that's another point of archetypes and the things that Carl Jung found was that there was a certain amount of characters and a certain amount of stories. And what I found interesting about the exploration across the world is that, oh, there's this story pattern here. Oh, there's this story pattern here. There's this story pattern here. Oh, they're the same story patterns, but they're in different cultures. And guess what? We didn't have the internet yet, so they weren't sharing them. The
Yeah.
same as God and Allah and whoever else. But then in those stories, there's these characters, and oh, that character's like this character, and that's like this character. And so then it's like what storytelling for all time has actually been about us understanding our behavior and parts of ourselves, which is the
Yes.
importance of fairy tales and
Yeah.
myth and things. So he drew that, as my understanding, into, oh, that's why we have stories and we actually are those parts of self, and then extrapolating the shadow and the light. I went and looked at his work in the Flinders University Library when I went to uni for a while. It was very, very long, like very long, like meters and meters of books in a row long.
Really? I
Yeah.
wonder what they did with them.
They were at
Because
Flinders Uni. They're probably still there.
they're not, there's not a unit on Carl Jung's work taught in the whole country any longer. David Tacey taught the last unit at La Trobe, and it's probably it'll be 8 or 10 years ago now that was canned.
I think that's ridiculous because, like, for me, when I've gone, okay, when I go back and look at my recovery in trauma stuff, archetypes is one of the first things that I found that set me off going, oh, I can move from dark to, oh, I have dark. Oh, there's hope because I can move from dark to light. And I've got a picture of what that looks like
Yeah.
because of Carl Jung's work and
Yeah.
others' interpretation of it. So I think it's pretty important.
So you were talking about the work that I do. So rather than me talk about it, can you talk about it in a practical sense, what difference it made to you? So I'm thinking I just talked about the warrior, and you then talked about the shadow sides. And so we're talking about balancing, right? We all, those shadow sides are important parts of us, but we don't want them to be out of balance. So an out of balance warrior can be very destructive.
Yeah, that's right. Same as an out of balance Demeter.
Yeah.
But that's interesting though. I guess, like, as a mum, I can see how the shadow is important rather than just, I hadn't really even thought about balance. I'm like all light, all the way.
You have thought about balance because you sent back your recently completed PMA PMAI form after 4 years, and your archetypes, the way that Carol Pearson has this framework set up, we look at them in pairs, and those pairs balance each other.
Yeah, yeah.
So we've already mentioned the warrior and the caregiver.
Can we look at that shortly?
Yes.
That work shortly. Get my brain back on track. It's so interesting stuff. And I think I'm just gonna look at my little agenda thing. So hopefully that makes sense as to why we're talking about it. That was sort of why I went on that little riff, was like, it's actually so hard, I think, for anyone to admit that they're wrong or that they have something to work on. We talked about that before we started recording.
Yeah.
Like the people who just live in life blaming everybody else. And it's like, dude, you and me can see straight up what's going on. But I guess this is a tool that can help. Just
Yeah,
while talking about it. So you asked how it helped me. I'll talk about your work soon. I'll just maybe talk about the introduction, like in terms of how I found it. And I hope I have my screens ready to share. I'm just going to quickly zip over before I push. Oh no. Share screen. See what's happening here. Maybe I'll share the links after. I did learn about it at university in psychology, but I studied psychology quite a long time ago now. I would have been in my mid-20s and I'm 45 now. So that is 20 years ago. But it was only touched on really briefly. But I actually decided to stop studying psychology. And like we talked about briefly last week about the idea of helping one person versus lots of people and how to do that. And so I actually stopped studying that and went and studied art, and I studied writing and sculpture, whatever. But anyway, in writing, came across archetypes as well. And it was very soon after I'd studied psychology, I was like, oh, they're here as well. That's weird. And so then it just kept playing in my mind. I was like, oh, and then my favorite musician, I'm going to show this quickly. This is my favorite musician, Tori Amos. I have her signature. And this album here, American Doll Posse, I'll share the link so people can deep dive into it. But she actually had 4 different characters. I'll go down to the grid. These are the 5 different characters, and they were all drawn on. The whole thing was about archetypes, and so she's actually played these archetypes, and then they wrote songs from like their perspective, and she told a story.
Uh-huh.
So here we've got confrontational warrior woman, unafraid and aggressive. That's Athena. And those songs are quite dark. She did this an amazing thing where she actually really extrapolated their personalities and like what they call an Easter egg hunt or something, I don't know, on the internet before she launched the album. So one had a blog and one had like a MySpace and one had like they had different things. It was really interesting. But it was really interesting to me because that was what led me to it. So then how did it help? Like I said before, I'll show you these books. Who am I? I don't know if these are my tags or someone else's tags because I've loaned this book to a few people. But they're really, I might take a picture and share it later, but they're really simple. So this is manager director, right? So I'm that's probably not that helpful. But like you've got, it has a really brief example of, oh, this is stupid. Is it stupid? Light and shadow. And then it's got questions that you ask. And if you answer most of them, you would tag the page. So the top tags are like, for sure, the one on the side are like maybe. And then it explains the light and it explains them in childhood and it explains them, like light and the dark aspects. And so for me, when I got hold of this, I don't even know how I got hold of it. I was like, oh, that's me. So I actually got stuck on one. And I was in my first marriage and I got stuck on one of the questions and it was Aphrodite. And I was like, oh, that's not me. And I had it on the maybe. But this book actually asks you to use your intuition. It's a whole thing. I won't go on about it. But it's one of those weird university things where you can't go on until you actually admit the truth. And I kept getting stuck on this one and I looked at it and the question was mistakes. I think it was mistakes, sex for love. And I was like, that's not me. Who would want to admit that? And I was married. And then I was like, one day I was like, no, that's actually true. That's actually true. And then I realized my marriage was a sham and it was founded on drinking because we only saw each other a few times a week before we got married and we drank every time. And that was the lead to me ending that marriage. But from there, though, and it helped me with my parenting because I was like, oh, I'm overprotective and overbearing. And I was like, I actually don't want to be like that and I don't want to hurt my son. But I was hurt so much growing up, I just wanted to protect him, like really, really wanted to protect him. But I would have squished the shit out of him had I not actually learned to step back. And these books and those tools helped me admit that I had things I needed to work on and go and get therapy about and things I just needed to learn to breathe through. And as I was healing, sometimes and this was well before I came across IFS, and I think we've touched on this before about there being similarities. I remember not wanting, I was doing something to help me heal, and then this part of me just didn't want to do it. And then I was like, oh, I think that's like the shadow of this thing. And it was really resistant. And I just sort of nurtured myself through that. And I was like, that's the shadow. I am actually actively trying to work toward the light and work through that with that part, essentially. So it was just a really easy to use tool on the start of my healing journey. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of it. Doesn't answer the question in terms of your work.
Well, they have that in common, though. They're easy to use tools that provide good insight.
Mm,
Yeah. And ways to address the imbalances, should you choose to.
yeah, this sun
Yeah.
is really
You
annoying.
know, we need to keep in mind that our ways of being are founded on our coping mechanisms. They've been very important in our lives, but
Yeah.
they as long as they remain unconscious, because they start when we're not very conscious beings yet, then they start perpetuating dysfunctional adult lives. And so when we understand them, we have a choice to do something with them. Because generally speaking, we're not under the same kind of threats for survival when we're adults as we were when we were children.
Yeah. And that's like in IFS as well, like internal family systems, is that part actually helped us stay alive.
Yes, it was necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to pause this for 1 second.
Mm.
So where were we? I just adjusted my situation.
We're talking about our early coping
Hmm.
mechanisms, which generally speaking no longer serve us in adulthood. And so our task is to wake up to them. That's the first thing. And the second thing is to make a choice about whether we want to keep them or not. The third thing is to uh, bring them into our real, to do something about it.
Yeah, and it's like as a kid, I think we might have talked about it
Yeah,
in our last one. We had, and it's a core component of complex PTSD is that being trapped. So as a kid, you don't actually have much choice other than to dissociate or freeze. And for example, like I said at the start of this video, I was triggered yesterday by something that's quite difficult for me. And even though I have like these logical understandings, my body is still going, no, my body is scared. And I kept dissociating, but because I've had so much therapy now, I can notice it, And I was sort of like
well,
slipping right back into this bubble. And I'm like, you don't need to be like then counseling myself and talking to my partner. We don't actually need to do that. We actually can hold these feelings. We can look at them. It's kind of the only way through. But it's that little part of me that tried to survive when I was younger.
yeah, yeah.
So does that like I've got this highlight that I hadn't actually put on our list yesterday. But what is shadow work? I guess what you just said is shadow work, isn't it? Really? Some people there's a lot of people who promote I'm a shadow worker, like it's all fancy.
Yeah.
But I feel like
Yeah,
it's not like that fancy.
it's not mysterious.
No. Like,
No,
is it really what you just said?
it's the hidden stuff. That's what we mean by shadow work. It's the stuff that remains in the dark until we shine a light on it.
And that's what you talked about before. Like it's calling like learning to notice those things that aren't helpful that we sort of
That's our task as human beings. So the difference between human beings and the other kingdoms of Earth is that we have self-awareness. Animals have awareness, they have consciousness, but they don't have self-awareness. So we can self-reflect, we can go inward and learn about ourselves. And then, so this, remember our mythology, we were talking about archetypes and mythologies. Our creation mythology is about, in the center of the garden stood the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and we ate of it. And that kicks off human evolution, right? So we were banished from the garden, and the ideal would be to find our way back to the garden. But we need to be cut off from our spiritual heritage in order to develop freedom. Sorry if I'm sort of taking several steps back, but our task in our evolution is the development of freedom. And freedom comes through making choices.
and
So
you go on.
no. So the things that happen to us when we're young, we have no choice over those things, and they get buried deep in our psyche. and we form patterns of protection. And as adults, when we have the possibility of greater consciousness, self-awareness, we have these great storerooms full of stuff to work on for our development. And if we didn't, we would just sort of, sail over the surface of life. And so when we talk about trauma, there's this real legitimate thing called post-traumatic growth,
Yeah.
right? They know that about people who get through their trauma or come to grips with it, because we never get over it, but come to grips with it, just as you were saying, oh, that's real about me, right? Instead of fleeing from it or fighting it or freezing, whatever it might be, we accept ourselves as we are. Yeah, and the difference being, and you and maybe anybody watching this or listening will know, is that when we learn about our stuff and the stuff that's tripped us up, and when we do something about that, we lead a richer life than we did before. And so trauma, in my view, is the depths of difficulty, right? Because of that sort of stuckness that goes with trauma, it's really hard to pry into that and to loosen it up and to bring it to light, never mind change it.
Yeah.
But when we do, we live life at a level that wouldn't have been possible had we not.
Oh,
And,
absolutely. Sorry, I cut
and
you off.
generally speaking, people are very grateful for that once they're through the constant triggering and the constant chaos and so on and so on. Yeah, so that's post-traumatic growth.
And that, for me, that you said constant triggering, and it freaking was for a long time.
Yeah.
But I feel like that comes after awareness. Like you can't unsee it. So when you're in the dark and you're drinking too much, you're working too much, and you're ticking all the boxes for humanity, like, you've got the good job. You've got, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like,
Yeah. You've done all your duties.
yeah, and you don't realize that it's actually, some of those things are because you're actually a bit broken. And then because I remember when I first was diagnosed with complex PTSD, my son was a teenager. And then it was like this veil got lifted and I could see all these things, and it felt like it broke me more. And he made a comment. He was a teenager, so I don't judge him for it. But he made a comment like, "Oh, it's like you're getting into it, like you're really getting into this diagnosis." And I was like, "Nah, I'm feeling things for the first time. I'm also realizing things that I never pieced together before." And it messed me up a bit. And I was like, damn, I wish I never opened that box, like, to begin with. But like, if I'd have actually kept going down the trajectory that I was, my son and I probably wouldn't even be close now, because I was such a workaholic and I wasn't present. And it was really wanting to be a good mum and have a good connection with my child and make sure that he didn't grow up messed up that drove my healing. This is what happens when I get triggered. I forget what I'm saying.
So what your son pointed out to you, perhaps, like you're really getting into it, what you did, perhaps, you can confirm or deny, is channel your alcoholism into your healing.
Channel my what?
Like you took the same approach with your workaholism, right? So
yeah, like I went all in.
You went all in because you do.
Yeah, I wanted it done, and it's not
You
done.
just went in a direction that, so somebody observing you before that might have said, you love your work, don't you? And you would have said yes. But the point is, it's the drivenness, right? If you can find a calling or a direction for your drivenness, that's what satisfies. This is the adrenaline.
Well, I don't know. There might be part of that, but it actually was really distressing as well. Like, to realize what I'd lost. Like, even a couple of days ago.
Yes.
I cried to a friend. I was like, some days, like I've done a lot of healing, and some days I get a bit confused and still feel a bit hurt about things. And I said, I was grieving the fact that my childhood was taken from me. I was like, felt like crying saying it, So when you learn, oh, this is why I'm doing this, and then you're like, oh, that's pretty gut wrenching. That's hard. But then there was something I wrote down. I wanted to sort of pull on from what you said before, and it leads on to this. Is you said our task? I think you said it. I think I wrote it down right. Our task is to find freedom. Freedom comes from choices, and I think one of the key parts, like I've had many years of different therapies and learning different things, and learning from people like yourself, is how to make choices and how to even get awareness. So like I found, and I just wanted to touch on that because it's easy to run around with blinders on for your whole life and not get awareness. And that's actually easier to begin with, but long
It's
term.
not easy. It's
What?
different.
Yeah, I
It's
was going
not
to say
easy
long
though,
term.
as you would say yourself, right? You didn't have an easy life.
No, my hair's got
Sorry.
something weird happening. No, you're right. I didn't mean it easy, but at the
Yeah,
time
I
it
know
feels
what you
like the
mean.
easier. At the time it
It's
feels,
effortless.
yeah, it feels like
Yeah.
the easier option. And there's a thing around Facebook. It says choose your heart, and it's like, we can choose to stay drinking for the rest of your life and die young and not see your grandchildren and have your child upset that you drunk yourself to death, or so that's a hard thing, but it's actually feels easy in the moment. But then choose your hard, choose to quit and live a healthy life, and choose your hard. Yeah, unhealthy marriage where you're just going to stay there dissociated half the time and letting your husband push you around or partner push you around, whatever. That's hard to be in, but kind of you'll be like, oh, it's pretty hard to leave though.
Yeah.
But once you do, but then once you cross that threshold, there's post-traumatic growth, and then there's freedom. And that's my point. That's where freedom comes, is there, but how do you get there? And I think something you've taught me, and is a core part of IFS. And I would like to just do a tiny little explanation of the parts of the being, because it got lost in a podcast that I lost, is talking about strengthening the self. So like when I was doing, like I had a psychologist years ago, and I learned about the observer self. So you step back to observe yourself and you're thinking, oh, I noticed that I'm thinking this thought, rather than that thought happened in my head, therefore it's true. So you learn about the observer self. But the more time we can spend in our true self, the more aware we are of what's happening in our inner world. And then it gives us the ability to make choices. I feel like that's the main thing of all of this. Like, what do you think? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, as I say, it's actually freedom. It's not happiness, right? Life's not about happiness, but it is about, the integrity of the human being is around freedom. So even when people like Viktor Frankl or Bonhoeffer are in Holocaust camps, they discover their freedom. They don't have freedom of movement, and they don't have freedom about what they can eat, et cetera, et cetera. But they find their freedom within, and that's freedom of how they think, how they feel about things around them, and so on. Yeah. So and there are two examples. Mind you, a lot of people died in camps, as we know. They're there to survive. Actually, Bonhoeffer didn't survive the camps, but he smuggled out a fair bit of writing. He was a Lutheran priest, German Lutheran priest, and a very wise man.
Oh, look him up. I really enjoyed Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah,
That helped me a lot.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So, yeah, again, it's hard to, generally speaking, we live in the Western capitalist world where the American influence, it's not European in its origins, but the American influence is around um, freedom, the land of the free. But the expression of that freedom in America was mainly an economic privilege. and happiness. That was the core of
Mm.
American
There's a lot of that.
culture.
Yeah. I'm just trying to pass it in.
Yeah. And so happiness looks like it should be our motivator, but for people, and what I was alluding to before, when you start to do personal development stuff, you realize the richness, the inner richness that comes from that, and that by far outweighs the kind of happiness, the hedonistic sort of happiness.
Yeah, the
Uh,
superficial. I've got the house. I've got
yeah.
yeah, like I could care
But if
less
you don't
about that
know that,
now.
if you haven't taken that path of developing the inner world, and it usually comes from pain, it's
Mm.
initiated through struggle. Um, if you haven't gone there, then you don't know, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, have bigger and better holidays and cars and homes and so on, because you don't know better.
And I've also found a lot of peace, and this is the question I was going to ask you. I don't know why I can't log into this to see my notes. I wanted to ask you to just, I don't know, quickly explain, because another thing that I do find freedom in, and it took a long time to accept it because it also means accepting other bigger concepts, which I won't get into. But I know, like, we have our body, and like we can think, but I've got notes somewhere, and there's a podcast that I accidentally lost. My computer crashed. Like you've explained to me before, like there's like a higher self and a thinking, and can you explain that to me?
Yes. Yes.
Sorry.
So,
Maybe I'll find a
well,
diagram.
again, it's one of these things I think that um, people don't necessarily think about. We're not taught to think very deeply. And so in the field of psychology, so I'm a counselor and I'm a lecturer in counseling. So I'm continually, it's been 25 years now, I've been presenting stuff to people. And I think it's my job to be very clear in terms of making sense out of what is a very broad, an understanding of what it means to be human is quite an undertaking. So I do my best in terms of deepening my thoughts, and in order to get people to think, right? So I'm teaching people counseling, and in counseling, it revolves around our thoughts and our feelings or emotions and our behaviors. That's what psychology is all about, the interaction of those three things.
Yeah.
And the psyche is another word for soul. They are the same word. One is Greek and one is Roman or something like that. I can't remember what's what, but they are the same thing. So the faculties of our psychological makeup are thinking, feeling, and behaviors.
Mm.
But what is it that holds those things together? So when you get triggered, those three things are not integrated anymore, are they? Your thoughts will be all
No.
over the place. Your emotions are all over
Yeah.
the place. Your behaviors
Yeah.
are all over the place.
Yeah.
What holds them together?
Well, when you're highly triggered, not much.
No,
But
when you're triggered, not much. But so you mentioned IFS. So there's a few models of therapy that now are very happy to talk about the self with a capital
yeah,
S, right?
and you spoke about that from psychoanalysis.
Synthesis,
Synthesis.
psychosynthesis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But like that's what helps me now a lot more is tuning into my true self. And like my true self is, I believe, my soul, and isn't afraid of anything. Like that doesn't need to be. But it's my body
yeah.
that holds memories that
Yes.
gets wigged out. And then I'm like needing to bring myself back together by
Yeah.
tuning into that.
So I would you talked about soul, the true self. I call that your spirit, your individual spirit. Those other bits of you, thinking, feeling, and willing, those comprise your soul, the psyche.
Thinking, feeling, yeah. So this is where I get confused. I'm going to need a diagram because, like, it's like so. Is soul and spirit different?
Yeah. So what I'm
I get
talking
stuck.
about is the part of you that can go away down the beach or whatever and pull yourself back together. Or you can observe yourself. We talked about observing yourself.
Yeah.
Some people call it the witness. I think the term self needs to be understood as distinct from my thinking. So I have thoughts, but I am not my thoughts. I have feelings, but I am not my feelings. Um, I have a body, but I am not my body. I'm greater than all those things.
And we've got a meditation that will link to this.
Yeah, I'm a pure and eternal spirit of consciousness and will, is the way that meditation rolls. Yeah, so we have the power to step outside of our thoughts and our feelings and our behaviors and take charge. Otherwise, we will be victims. Trauma people will always be victims of their triggered responses until they can do that.
It feels so good to land there. Like Insight Timer has a bunch of meditations by Richard Schwartz as well. And he talks about like as your parts, as you settle the parts of you that are upset and come into your true self, allow that. He says that there's so much spaciousness, like it feels so open, and like you can actually hold the hard things and you can choose to go there, it's a beautiful thing. So shall we circle back? Have you got anything else you'd like to say on that before circling back to the PMAI stuff?
I do want to just, with internal family systems, it is designed, it might not appear this way at the outset or from the outside, but it is designed specifically to strengthen the self in relation to the parents. So you're doing IFS work at the moment, I think, or you have done, and you will notice that the therapist is asking you to speak to those parents instead of talking to those parents itself, right?
So is the self the soul?
No, the self is the spirit.
Why can't I get this?
The soul are the bits. Thinking, feeling, and willing are the faculties of the soul. But when we're talking about parts, we're talking about constellations or complexes. Freud and Jung both called them complexes that have thoughts of their own, rationales of their own, values of their own, behaviors of their own.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But so the idea in IFS is getting you to speak to that part, ask it when it arose, what it does for you, et cetera, is to strengthen the self in the eye of the part, right? The part of you needs to gain confidence that there's somebody in charge here before they can let go and integrate into the full personality. So that's the gift of IFS, is strengthening that self through all of those dialogues. That's the intention.
And I think that's where it sort of, for me, I don't know, makes sense, circles back a bit to archetypes, because for me, I see a strong link between those parts and archetypes in the shadow. So like when I've done over the last year or 2, year and a half, a lot of IFS work and a couple of different therapies, more breath work, stuff like that. And I did the fresh PMAI, and look at how I grown, And so I feel like they've got to be linked, because I've worked through those shadows and integrated the parts of myself that are wounded and taken on the strengths with the awareness of, other things like shadow. But yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely makes sense. Yeah. And you have the evidence to prove it.
Shall I pull it up?
Yes, sure.
And what I like about this, like you referred to this book before. So this is a book that people can get. People can look into this in different ways.
So the updated version of the one that I studied 25 years ago, as I said before, was called The Heroes Within 12 Archetypes That Live By. When they updated their research and republished it, the publication was then called whose life am I living?
Yep.
I think I have it on my bookshelf behind me. Should I go check?
Yeah, go check.
I'll go check.
We'll leave people just to look at this screen and wonder what it means, and then you can explain it in a minute.
So this is the awakening the heroes within 12 archetypes to help us find ourselves and transform our world.
Yep.
In that book, near the end of that book, is the survey that you fill in to, the original form of, you keep talking about the PMAI. Well, the Heroic Myth Index was included in this textbook. And so when you read all those chapters, and this is a much better read than the other book, except the research is not updated.
Yeah.
So I was working with this for years. When they put out their next publication, I was a little miffed by that, right? Because I thought I'd nailed this, right? I got it. And I was in touch with Carol Pearson, and I said, is it necessary to use the updated form?
Yep.
And she said, yes, don't use the old form. So on the basis of her own research, she was convinced that the updated version was better. And so I went and I cross-referenced every response and every question with its outcome. And indeed, I could no longer use the old form.
So that's the old book.
So here's the new book. What Story Are You Living is the name of the book.
The reason we're looking at this, because we'll probably wrap up soon, is to show using archetypes in healing in action, I guess.
So it's a self-assessment tool, and the outcome. So this is what the outcome of it, right? Like with any survey, they will gauge. So those are scores out of 30. And they're in pairs. It's significant. The individual archetypes are significant, but the paired archetypes are quite significant as well. Because that's where you find your balance. So the balance between the innocent and the orphan, that's about trust and mistrust. Psychology also, Erik Erikson's childhood development work talks about our first fundamental predisposition in life is to be trusting or not trusting. And now we've learned to talk about secure and insecure attachment. And so those are represented in archetypal form by the innocent and the orphan. The difference being, as Andrew keeps emphasizing, both of those have their strengths and they both have their shadow side. And when you put them together in balance, when you can find the balance of those, that's where your real strength comes from. So if you're born into a loving, supportive family and everything is going really well, then the innocent is going to arise. And then at some point, you're going to start school or have brothers and sisters who fight with you, and your world's going to come crumbling down because you realize it's not all good and wonderful. And so you're going to start to put up walls and become more resistant. That's the growth of the orphan in you. And the balance of those, we sort those out in the first few years of life. But if those influences are really strong, so the orphan, for example, if there's nobody to care for you in your very early years, you start caring for yourself. You get the unconscious understanding that you're in this alone.
So can I ask a question? Sorry. So
sure.
that in a dream world, would my orphan and creator be a bit more in balance?
I was looking at the top one.
Yep.
So the top one is 2020. And what this tells us is in 2020, when Andrea did her first test, the orphan was very high. She was very protective of herself. So the innocent, the trusting part of her, she didn't really let out. The orphan dominated that balance in her. It also keeps her quite aloof from other people. She's very independent, critical in her thinking and so on, but not so connected. That's not so easy for her in those numbers. In 2024, when she did it again, and she's done a whole lot of work since then, that's a great balance for an adult to have. So your innocent is operating very strongly. You can have very trusting relationships with people again. What that says to me is your orphan is very well developed, so you can let your walls down now. So that imbalance in the second one is very favorable to having relationships with people, which are very important to games.
Well, when I saw I knew that it mattered, but I wasn't exactly sure how because I haven't studied it like you. But I know I also have done an attachment quiz recently, and it put me in, there's a quadrant, and I was like smack bang in the middle of secure. And I was like, what? And when I first did a quiz, and I always try to make sure I do reputable ones, I actually was equally messed up on all of the kinds of not so great attachment, like anxious and whatever they all were. It was
Yeah.
all around 33%. None of them was a good one.
Right.
And yeah, so yeah, you keep going.
So those things in that first test, so I wrote up a couple of pages for Andy. We also talked about it, but
Do you want me to
uh,
look at it at all or not?
well, we probably don't have time,
No, that's
Andrea.
fine.
I can just speak to it. So the warrior and the caregiver, they emerge. So where I learned this in university was in the developmental stages of life, right? So these also go across the lifetime. They unfold in their time. We assimilate these archetypes, these archetypal energies into our being, and they find their place, and then the next ones arise. That doesn't mean we've mastered those, um, and we might have to go back and revisit them. Particularly the innocent and the orphan, which are very formative ones, that trust and mistrust business. Andrew's warrior and caregiver were really well balanced the first time around. The warrior is stronger than the caregiver now, but not alarmingly so. We should pay attention where there's a gap of 5 or more points. We're encouraged to have a look at that. But that gap doesn't apply to the innocent and the orphan. It also doesn't apply to the destroyer and the creator. I'm probably getting too detailed now.
It's all
So
right.
your seeker and lover were really well balanced, and they are still very well balanced. The creator and destroyer, I know that this was a concern of yours at the time. You have a lot of creator energy. You can see lots of possibilities for the future. Connect with stuff that you really want to do to bring into the world. That's the creator at work. It's a midlife archetype.
Yeah.
Was really strong for you in 2020, is even stronger now. And your destroyer in 2020 was really busy letting go of shit. And it is still busy letting go of shit, but it's enabling the creator to be more active now, right? So that the destroyer, if you're engaged in bringing stuff into the world, the destroyer is very helpful in separating the essential from the non-essential and letting you know what you don't need to worry about,
And
right?
that's like the Kali energy, burning
Oh,
stuff,
okay.
you know,
So
the
now
other day.
you're really clear about moving into the future. And I know that you've let it go a lot of stuff. You've sold your business, you've moved house and so on and so on. So that's the destroyer making things possible for you.
Mm.
The ruler and magician, perfect balance now. If you look at those numbers, full stop, you're a high energy person and those numbers show that. But right now, the magician and the ruler are in perfect balance. So that's how we manage the world around us. The ruler does it through being organized and, it's an interventionist, right? I'll handle that. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Bam, bam, bam. And the magician takes into account that we all have our own tasks and lessons to learn. I can just stand back and let things unfold.
Well, that's something I've really learned a lot. I won't keep going because I love learning from you and I'm here to do that. But I'm pointing at my laptop like it matters. Magician 23 in 2020 and 27 in 2024. I actually have come to believe that the universe has my back and things just unfold and I can't fucking control everything. And even when I try, things sometimes get worse.
Yeah. But you also have the comfort of knowing that you can you know, if things aren't going well, you can step in because your ruler is just as strong as your magician.
Mm.
So that's the thing with them. If they're both strong, you can let things unfold and step in when you need to. And your sage and jester back in 2020, 28 and 15, that's quite alarming, you know, in terms of heavy. The sage is very serious. It's the
Mm.
seeker of truth. And these late in life archetypes, I mean, we have these energies all through life, but they're only not only, they're poignant, particularly significant at particular times. So the sage and jester um, at, in our foremost at the end of our life, when we have determined, we reach a point where we think we understand what's important about life, and the sage would say truth is the important thing. The jester would say enjoying life is what's important. And they are both very important things. And when the sage is 28 and the jester is 15, there is no time for enjoying anything,
Mm.
right? The jester actually is dissociated at 15. I want nothing to do with you. Thank you very much. And if anybody talks about going out and having fun, I just look down my nose at those people because they don't get it. However, but it's heavy, right? Everything is really serious when the
I
sage,
remember feeling like that,
yeah.
you know.
And they're much better in balance now. The jester came up to 23. I don't know how you did that, but life must be somewhat more enjoyable now.
I laugh at it. I just, so much happens. I'm just like, sometimes it's like, you should gotta be fucking joking. Like, you know, and over the last year or so, um, I've made comments a few times about being a comedian. Like, I have people in stitches when I'm telling the worst
Right.
stories, and I'm like, well, you've got to laugh, like, or you might just die. So,
Yeah.
like, just let it go. And some of the ironies, and I think also that's part of being in my truer self as well. It's like it reminds me. This is weird to say. I remember when we first started working together in different capacities a few years ago, you'd have this, like, you're older than me, obviously, but like you sort of had this giggle about you. So, like when I was really serious, you just sort of have like a little giggle and be like, "Oh, you don't know yet." It kind of felt like that, like not in a bad way, in a good way. And I feel a
That's my
bit,
magician speaking.
yeah, I feel a bit like that myself now,
Right.
like I don't know what's around the corner. I don't
Yeah.
know how the universe, I can't be bothered being scared. Like,
Yeah.
I can't be bothered.
So
Like,
that's the magician speaking, actually, but it
mm,
creates room for the jester to poke its head out, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 So I didn't go to comedy school to get that up or anything. I just I just became more me and let
Yeah.
myself be more me.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's dreadfully inappropriate.
Well, and another aspect that I can see in your chart is it's much easier for you to be with people now. So you know, with an innocent of 12, you were probably always on edge
Mm.
when you were with people, hard to let your guard down, um, and much easier now to just be in a space with people.
Well, the one thing that's happened, I think we may have touched on this before, even just in our chats. There's this Buddhist theory of non-attachment, and I feel like that needs to be in the attachment world more. Like you've got secure attached, but I
Oh
feel
yeah,
like
okay,
non-attachment isn't actually about I'm protecting myself and I'm distant
yeah,
because I'm scared. Non-attachment is going whatever will be, will be.
yeah,
Like I can't control it. If someone turns on a dime, so what used to really affect me is somebody turning on a dime, and I would be shocked and hurt. Whereas now I'm like, humans are just humans. Like we're gonna make mistakes and some of them are gonna turn on a dime and some of them won't. And all I can do is just keep healing and being my best self and accept where that person is at. If they turn on a dime, they do. Maybe I'll see them later. Like
yeah,
it's not um a fear, it's just acceptance.
yeah.
And does that ring true for that innocent coming up? It's like I just It's not caring. It's just
Sure, sure. Yes, there's a whole lot more mobility in your, well, you talk about becoming more yourself. So there's that kind of fluidity, mobility in your being. All of those things. I don't know what the hermeneutic or the particular key was that got all of those things in motion, but they've all changed significantly and allow you to be more fully human, if I can put it like that, right? Instead of constricted. By that, I don't mean you weren't human, but you were constricted by your fears, mostly your
yeah.
protectionism, which is very clear between your innocent and the orphan. You know, again, the earlier ones go the deepest. And so the field of psychology, when it puts our trusting selves or untrusting selves as foundational to our being, that is very true. And that's what we see here again. So the insecure attachment styles are quite indicative of what this chart might look like for people.
Like the 2021, as in insecure attachment because my innocent. Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
what I mean. Yeah.
Not my now one. I'm secure.
No, you are really cool, man.
I'm so cool. And for
Yeah.
me, that's what this whole, I think we can probably wrap up in a second with this kind of conclusion, unless you have something else to add, which you're welcome to. For me, that's what this whole series, once I work out a name and what it will be, and if there'll be a course and whatever else, is all about, is actually sharing how I got from 2020 to 2024. You know,
So that's a really good um yeah, I know that your work is about helping people understand complex trauma. And this is a window through which you can do that. And it's probably, you know, for me, this is you're the one who made that connection, right? I didn't prescribe archetypes for trauma. You were interested in the archetypes workshop and you came along to the workshop.
yeah.
And in fact, I was only learning about trauma those same few years ago.
Well, we had some interesting discussions at one of those workshops. I was like arguing with you.
Yeah. Well, it was that recent that I finally got you know, the world of trauma open to me when I stopped lecturing all the time and opened the doors to my practice to mere mortals instead of word of mouth sort of existentialist types. That I started encountering trauma, and of course, you know, it's shone a light on my own childhood as well. So I understood it from that perspective.
And that makes sense to what you just said, because we're in, or saying, our messages, I was asking if you were looking at running more of these kind of workshops, and you were sort of like, well, because you said you were looking at running groups one day, maybe.
I'm very happy to run archetype workshops. I've
Oh,
been
yeah.
too caught up teaching. It is very rich learning for people. They do appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. And and obviously like for me to even be able to look at these scores and have this discussion is really, really cool. And to be able to use it as a message of hope. And but no, the reason I was saying what I just said is because you were saying about like you were teaching more than practicing, but I'm glad for the world that you went back to practice, because that's where you learned all this stuff and put it to
The
action.
trauma stuff.
Yeah, and put it to action and deep dived into it. But like just in life, it's, you know, we find ourselves all do this thing and then we might not be so happy with it anymore. But look at all the stuff that we learn, you know.
Yeah, that's right. And they all, you know, I think I know it's true of me, and I think it's true of you that our right brains are quite operative, and we synthesize stuff, and so we learn this and we learn that, and we see how they go together, and then we learn that, and we can see bits of that belong in that, you know, vortex or complex or whatever it might be as well. That's what I like about teaching counseling, actually, because young people learn things in silos and they teach things in silos. And there's not many people left my age teaching in the tertiary sector who can hold things together because of the, you know, decades of experience that we've had. I know other people who can do that, but so, you know, everybody moves out sooner or later. But my students tell me, you know, ask me the kind of questions that just get me going on these long rants. And they say, we love it when you do that. And I get
Mm.
why, because that's the stuff I loved when I was young. What holds all these notions together? You know?
And you're excited about it too. Like I remember earlier, and you were like, "Oh, I'm not sure if you want to have this kind of conversation," but you went down this whole other rabbit hole. And because you've got so much experience and knowledge, like it just comes out. And I know, because I'm kind of the same. Like I don't know if I ever told you, I always joke that I'm giving TED talks. I'll be like, "Thanks for coming to my TED talk."
Right.
And I was teaching in my old studio a while ago, and this lady, she sat down on the floor and crossed her legs and looked at me and smiled. And I was standing up, and I looked at her. I said, "What are you doing?" She goes, "I'm waiting for my TED talk." And it's that same thing of the joy of bringing things together and explaining them to somebody else in the hopes that their life it will help them, or
Yeah.
that message might get taken to somebody else, or it will impact the world in some way, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, it's exciting. I don't think we have anything else to say about archetypes. Do you have anything else to say about
No,
archetypes?
we should let these people go. Anyone who's still listening, they deserve a gold star.
We'll give them a gold star. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
let's say sayonara to the world. Thank you. I'm going to press stop share. We can say bye properly.
Sayonara, world.
Sayonara, world. Thank you for listening.
She's making fun of my accent.
Probably accidentally.
Sayonara, world. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on today's deep dive into trauma recovery, archetypes, and finding freedom within yourself. Today, we looked at how post-traumatic growth comes from awareness, integration, and facing what's been lost, which is really important. It's not about just flicking through into acceptance. It is about facing it and sitting with it. That's one of those things that is very uncomfortable, but very worth it. We looked at the importance of identifying and balancing your archetypes. We looked at the archetypes of innocent and orphan, creator, destroyer, sage, jester. And you might remember that my sage was very strong and my jester was very weak, and my jester got a lot stronger, which is super exciting. And we also looked at using internal family systems to strengthen yourself, which allows your inner parts to trust you and to integrate. And you can head to the show notes to be linked to a mindfulness practice to support you with that. That's led by Gary. I really wanted it, and I wanted the world to have access to it. And the Spotify stats say that 45-year-old women listen to it a lot, and I think it's all me. Anyway, that's how much I love it. We also looked at the power of self-observation, non-attachment, and humor as tools for navigating life with more ease and flexibility. So self-observation being really key. We'll talk about that in a second in the practices. Non-attachment to your own behaviors and failures. You might feel like a failure, but it's about becoming non-attached to that and just noticing. And it's the same as non-attachment to outcomes and stuff and things, which is an interesting big one we could look at another day. And humor has been really helpful for me. So to the practices, I do have notes because it's so much easier. This thing has a teleprompter, but I don't like it. Okay, observe your parts. We did do this in the last podcast, but this is a bit of a deepening of that. What you want to do is notice when a specific part of you is reactive and gently ask it what it needs. So what that looks like is you notice, oh, I'm up in my head having an argument and having 5 imaginary conversations in 5 different directions. So you notice that, oh, I notice that I'm doing that thing where I overthink, overplan. And then you go, well, that's a part of me. It's a part of me that's scared or trying to protect me. So then we can go, hey, little part, I noticed that you're a bit scared. What do you need? Now, there is a great practice. Grab a pen, write this down because I don't know if I can link it, by Richard Schwartz on the Andrew Huberman podcast. They've got the long podcast explaining internal family systems, which is really beneficial. And then there's also a little itty bitty one that you can just follow along as a practice, which is a great taster. So you don't have to do this by yourself in your imagination. So definitely look that up. You can reflect on archetypes. So which of the archetypes from the episode feel strong? So if I say to you, which one did you resonate with the most? Do you remember going, oh, gee, I'm really in destroyer land, and okay. And there's a place for destroyer land because that's how you get to creation land. But anyway, so which archetypes feel strong and might need more attention in your life? To do this, again, you notice what's happening, and then you can think about, well, what triggered that? So what triggered that imaginary conversation that went in 5 different directions? And for me, it might be an important relationship that I'm struggling with that I really want to be healthier. And that triggers like abandonment stuff, which is my orphan, which comes from childhood. So you need to analyze everything, but we can notice it. And just by shining a light on it and starting to notice, we can start to be more tender with ourselves. Like I'm an emo goth kid. And you can do things like I've said before, which is if you're feeling very serious a lot and everything's really, really hard, and we can bring in some play and some humor. And to do this, I actually watch comedy because it does things to you hormonally in a good way. And I'm sure that there are science words for that. And I didn't look them up before I said the thing. So I don't know the science words right now. But, good things. Comment if you know what the good things are and which hormones are doing the thing. Okay, if you found this episode valuable, don't forget to like and share and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And remember, the path to freedom starts by being aware of your inner world, your thoughts, your little parts that are kicking off, all those kinds of things, your feelings, the way your body reacts, the way your body tenses. When we start to become more of that, we can reflect, which helps us do the damn work. Until next time, take good care, and thank you for doing your bit for the superpowered revolution, because the more of us that evolve, the more of us will evolve, and the more of us that heal, the more of us will heal, which is really exciting, which is why it's a revolution. This is pretty much the end of this podcast series, I think. I may be able to do a Q&A with Gary at some point. It was a massive, massive blessing that he did this work with me and brought it into the world. And I'll be doing other podcast series with similar heart and intention really soon. So till next time, keep healing, and over and out. Bye.